Hi everybody. In this video, I want to talk about what we do when there don't seem to be any words that will work. What to do when we reach the limits of language and in some ways the limits of communication. Hi everyone, I'm Bruce Lambert from howcommunicationworks.com. Let's get started. So recently, in talking to a few of my friends and family members and people from the blog and my friends on Facebook, they've raised a couple of really interesting dilemmas, often family dilemmas, and or with close friends. And they asked me sort of, what should I say in this situation? And in several of the cases, I thought, well, there isn't much to say in this situation. And what that made me think is that we sometimes reach the limits of language. Or another way of thinking about it is that not every problem is a communication problem, and not every problem can be solved with communication. We've been led to believe sometimes that we can solve every problem with communication. If only we can make ourselves understood, then all problems can be solved. But I think most of us realize that that isn't actually the case. Sometimes I can understand you perfectly well, and what you want and need and your feelings, and you can understand me perfectly well, and yet we have a fundamental disagreement about our needs or beliefs or values or preferences. And no amount of talking is ever going to solve that. It's a real disagreement. It's not one that's based on misunderstanding. It's one based on genuine differences. Now, I suppose in an ideal world, there is a way to continue talking, building common ground, exploring. If we differ about some values, maybe there's a higher level value where we agree. But sometimes it's just a genuine disagreement, and no more talking is going to solve it. So we can either stop talking or and agree to disagree, or we can even part ways. So I want to tell you about these three situations just as examples of this. The first is a situation raised by an old friend of mine, someone I've known since elementary school, a Facebook friend who talked about, she had a close friend who had just lost a child in an accident. A grown child had died in an accident. And she was the person who had suffered the loss was just devastated, so much so that she couldn't even really hear the name spoken of the person that had died. And as a result, she didn't want people to contact her and offer her condolences because it was just too raw. She needed space and even silence about this painful topic. So what do you do when even the mention of someone's name is too painful, and yet you want to offer someone condolences? Well, in the previous video where I talked about how to comfort people, one of the things I said is that it's often not the words that comfort people, it's the connection. It's simply our presence or our witnessing of their suffering, or if we could somehow communicate to the people that we love that we're with them, that they're not alone, that we love them, and that we want them just to feel our presence and our connection. That alone is healing, because of course in this case there's nothing we can say that brings back the loved one, and if all of us who have suffered a significant loss like that, we know there's nothing anyone can say that can ease our pain in the worst moments. So what my friend did, I thought, was absolutely brilliant. She just sent a text message with a bunch of heart emojis and other emojis that just expressed love and connection and concern. And the friend, for the first time, responded basically saying thank you, or I love you too, or something like that. So I thought that was just a beautiful example of how when words won't suffice, maybe we should use emojis. I mean, when we're texting, emojis are a way to express ourselves non-verbally, and when we can't actually give someone a hug. In this case, my friend and her friend were far apart by thousands of miles and couldn't see one another. So this was the only way to do it. I just thought it was a beautiful example of comforting someone without words in a way that worked. So that's one situation. The other two situations are sort of uglier and nastier. And we're familiar with these often, many of us, from our, the things that go wrong in our relationships and in our families and close friendships and work relationships. So the first one has to do with, they both have to do sort of with narcissism, with people who we're talking to who aren't really good faith partners in a dialogue and aren't really willing to offer us any empathy. They seem incapable of empathy. And they're just really, really difficult people to deal with. So what do you do? The first example was another Facebook friend. She was telling me about a difficult conversation she needed to have with a relative, and she needed to make a request of this relative about a very sensitive family topic. And it was her opinion that the relative simply incapable of hearing it, and that almost every interaction with this relative was just an occasion to be abused and for the relative to get angry at her. So this is also a situation. I think if you encounter someone who's really, really narcissistic to a pathological extent, it doesn't do much good to engage them, because their pathology makes them bad partners in communication. They can't really obey the sort of basic rules of discourse that allow ordinary, reasonable people to solve their problems through communication. So there are basic rules of cooperation in discourse, but people with certain kinds of pathology, they break all those rules, and therefore it's sort of impossible to engage with them, because all of the ground rules for normal, reasonable, ethical conduct are not in force. And so we go into those interactions obeying those rules because we're decent people, but they go into those interactions prepared to flout and ignore all those rules. So that makes us very vulnerable. And we often end up just hurt because the people will abuse us, accuse us, blame us, make us feel guilty, and use all the sort of tricks of the narcissistic trade to just make us miserable. So the advice I gave in that situation was to detach. This is sort of standard advice about people who are addicted or people who are narcissistic, is to detach, or detach with love. This doesn't mean telling them F you and I never want to see you again. That actually feeds into it. You just either don't speak to them at all, or when you speak to them, you just kind of stay detached. You reflect back what they're saying. If they're angry with you, say, I can see you're angry with me. I can see that you have a poor opinion of me. I accept your poor opinion of me. But mostly just don't enter into conversations with them. And it sometimes might mean not being around them. But this is because there's nothing you can say, there's nothing you can do, there's no magic words that will heal their personality disorder. So if you want to be healthy, you just have to not communicate with them. And the third example is another friend who's going through a divorce and dealing with a partner who has these same sorts of kind of narcissistic tendencies. And I was talking to this friend yesterday on the telephone, and he was saying that, it was impossible to negotiate with this person. Again, they weren't a good faith partner negotiation because they thought if they wanted it, that was a reason. So in a negotiation, you have to give reasons, you have to negotiate, but this person was so narcissistic, they thought that I want it. In any sort of situation, their fundamental belief was, well, I want, you don't understand. This is what I want. And therefore, you should want it too. Or therefore, I should get it. And he said, well, why should you get it? That's not fair, right? By any sort of objective standard of reasonableness, that's not fair. Let's do something that by some rational analysis is fair. But then they come back and say, oh, no, you don't understand. I want this other thing. I want it. And they think that their want trumps everything. This is sort of narcissism again. And so no amount of, and then they might try to explain to you in different words what they want and why they want it, and then reinforce that they want it, as if we didn't understand their wants. So they think there's a communication problem, that we don't understand their wants. And if only we understood their wants, we would want that too, or we would give them whatever they want. They think that the world revolves around them. They think that if we only understood their wants, we would concede or comply or whatever. So there's, in many ways, no use communicating with this sort of a person either. Or you can say to them, I understand that that's what you want, but I want something different. Or we disagree about whether what you want is reasonable. I don't agree that what you want is reasonable. I'm not prepared to grant you what you want. And it's not because I don't understand what you want. I actually do understand you want. So it's not necessary to clarify anymore what you want. I've understood your wants, but I want something different. So we'll have to compromise or negotiate. And but if someone is that narcissistic that they can only understand their wants and they think their wants are reasons, right? Our wants are not reasons. Reasons are, I suppose, I mean, sometimes people say, why are you doing that? You say, I wanted to. But that isn't really a reason in the traditional rational sense. So in those cases, we just sometimes have to, let a third party decide. So when people are getting divorced and they can't decide, they have to let a judge decide. Or sometimes in a business relationship, we have to let a mediator decide, or a lawyer decide, or our superiors decide. But so it's a mistake to think all interpersonal problems or professional problems or family problems are communication problems. Many of them are. And many problems can be solved with communication. Even the very difficult ones I've described, I can imagine using communication potentially to kind of create new contexts, create new meanings, create new identities, and renegotiate the relationship in a way that might work. But it's a long shot. So in many of these cases, we have to just acknowledge words fail us. We reach the limits of language. There's nothing more we can say or do. And we have to take action, non-linguistic action, to resolve our differences. So that's been what's on my mind. I hope that's helpful to you, that sort of analysis. I'm sure there are people in your life where you think there's nothing else you can say or do, and you might feel bad that or you might think if you read another book, you can find out the right thing to say. But I want to let you know sometimes there's nothing to say. You simply have to end the relationship, withdraw from communication with that person, or resort to other means of resolving differences other than through consensus and communication. Lots of us who are rational, we like consensus, we like communication, but when we deal with people who don't share those same values, communication isn't the answer. So thanks so much. If you like this kind of video, press the like button, press the subscribe button, press the little notification button over here so that every time I make a new video, I can let you know. Go on over to howcommunicationworks.com, sign up for our mailing list. That's one of the most important things you can do if you like this kind of material. And of course, give us a comment down below. Tell us about a situation in your life where you reach the limits of language, and share this content with your friends. Put it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.